You know, I got up this morning a little bit early and I went downstairs to grab a cup of coffee, and as I'm going over to put some milk in the coffee, I got to thinking, somebody had to discover milk at some point. But then I got to thinking, what was the guy that actually discovered milk doing with the cow when he did it? Anyway, I made that one up. Good morning, everybody. I want to spend just a few minutes discovering other things here this morning. Talk a little bit about how we view the market. We do spend a lot of time thinking about it, obviously, and we come at it from a little bit different perspective than vendors or traditional research groups. And I think a lot of times we align with both of them, and sometimes we don't. We probably have, I think, a better touch with you all than maybe some others. So we kind of like to think about, we want to be like you, we want to think like you, and that's kind of how we come at the market. So we've been looking at cloud now for, well, managed services for more than a decade. We were all talking about it here in this room long before anybody else. And I think, and ultimately, really, cloud is just an extension of managed services in many ways. But a few years ago, we did this study, and we kind of say, look, at the old days, we used to have partners in the three buckets, which were really lifestyle VARs that didn't want to grow, and growth and hypergrowth VARs. And now we kind of look at it more like a path here. So today, what's kind of interesting to us is we thought earlier on, a couple of years ago, that we would see kind of a really rapid push into what we call the transformative business model in partners, which is really a really pure cloud type business model. And clearly we believe that vintage, which is the kind of traditional, let me come in, solve a problem, give me a check, walk away, call me back when you need another problem solved, really kind of just pure infrastructure type plays, that would shrink, and that is proven to be the case. But interestingly, the transformative group bumped up and now has bumped down, while progressive is really becoming a big piece. And progressive, they look a little bit like vintage, but really are pushing more towards what we believe is the transformative model, which is the cloud model of the future. Now, what's the reason for why do we see kind of this pure transformative group kind of pulling back a little bit? A lot of it's just because economics, right? The real money is still in that progressive space, which is a bit of a hybrid, right? I can do that on-premise, one-off business, but I can also help you figure out your cloud strategy. We don't see that going away all that quickly. So progressive is really where you want to be. The good news is we do think most of you in this room are starting to figure that out if you haven't already. And clearly, when you take a look at the attributes of the three different buckets, right? The vintage, which I think is a very tough space to be long-term, not something that any of you really want to kind of focus and build your future on. Progressive is where it's at. It's the sweet part of the channel. It's really where the vendors are looking for help, where they want to recruit. And then the transformative group. We spend a lot of time also trying to find new VARs, new partners that are coming into the market. And some of those are being born in a real pure cloud model. But many of them are coming right into the progressive space too, because there are just more dollars there. When you take a look at, you know, where can you find budget right now, right? That on-premise still remains a big piece of the business. While it is shrinking as a total percentage, it's still the largest portion. I would suspect it will remain the largest portion for some time and probably never goes away. But pure cloud is really starting to accelerate. And we'll talk about it a little bit later in the presentation about what does that mean. You know, being early is always a great place to be in this market, right? Every transition we've seen, those of you who get in early, especially in a technology that there's a mystery around, that's where the margin always is. And the longer you wait, the lower the margin will be when you get in. And that's just a fact. Big change that we see, and I think Tiffany talked about it yesterday, we've been talking about it for a while now ourselves, is the buying patterns inside of the organizations, right? When we ask you, where do you see the budget coming from? Clearly, line of business is becoming a bigger play. And interestingly, IT is starting to show up in smaller business. And when you think about the generational shift that's starting to happen now, the small businesses that are being formed today right? Because there's a lot of small businesses that are formed by very young people, and then they tend to get formed by people that are in their 50s that got downsized out of a corporation, have a few bucks, and say, I'm going to get out of this corporate deal, and I'm going to start my own gig. But the younger kids that are starting the new businesses grew up in an environment where technology was just part of everyday life. People like me, I grew up in a world where I remember when an answering machine was technology. So they demand technology from the get-go. There's an opportunity there. Many of their businesses are built on technology. So as a result, small businesses of the future are really geared toward being technology-driven, and that's a great opportunity, clearly, for the channel. We do see CMOs spending more money all the time. Whether or not they'll spend more than the IT director in a couple of years, who knows? I think that's a possibility, but the reality of it is it's this line of business and it's across the CMOs. And one thing CMOs tend to have is budget, right? So with there's budget, you can extract dollars. And there are those that are predicting that those CMOs will spend more. We believe they will. Will they spend more than IT? I don't know. I don't know that it much matters. I know this. There's somebody you want to get to know, right? So the key decision makers, right, there's just more points of entry at every level of the market today, right? It used to be you only sold to IT, and potentially IT reported up into the CFO, so you're in the CFO's office. And those were all important relationships, but the reality of it is there's budget in more places, and none of us really want to go down the capital expenditure line if we don't have to. We'd always rather spend and fund these types of things out of cash flow, right? Because then I don't have to worry about what happens a year or two down the road. So, you know, for somebody like myself, who's a classic line of business manager, a divisional manager inside of a larger corporation, I didn't buy IT 10 years ago. I do buy it today, and I buy it in the form of a service, and it's easy for me to do that because I can cut the service off if it doesn't work. And many of the people that work with me and for me buy IT as well, all on services, right? You know, Dan Dignam, who runs sales for us and cuts across a big piece of the market with me, has gone out and used different services to help the sales team be able to make presentations and follow that in the cloud. In a little company that we work with called ClearSlide. It's a cloud service. You know, Dan bought it. You know, I didn't buy it. He thinks it helps, so he went off and did it. He found the budget for it. So there's things like that that happen all the time. I think what it really means is you need to really get ingrained in the customer set that you work with. Learn how to make friends and understand what's going on there with more people. That's where the customer growth is going to come from in the future. So we have this huge democratization of IT, really, where all of us have got the capability now of buying it, and I'm not afraid of it the way I used to be. I don't have to understand it the way I used to be, because I'm buying it as a service. So what's driving that? Clearly, a lot of structural changes in all sorts of organizations. But the business model of every company, the internet's changed everything for every company. And as a result, we're thinking about things differently, no matter what business you're in. And that's just a fundamental shift, I think, that's happened. And we all, no matter what business you're in, you have to reinvent yourself every 2 or 3 years now, or somebody's going to reinvent it for you and put you out of business. So the result of that is you're always looking for new ways to drive revenue. When you drive a new revenue, you think, geez, I got to get to market more quickly than I ever did in the past, and I don't want to put a lot of money behind that. So how do I do that? Well, cloud services is the answer, and that's why the people in this room are so important going forward. I'd argue, you know, I'd much rather be a solution provider today than be an IT director. If you're an IT director, you've got the chance of being disintermediated. If you're in the channel right now and you know your customer set really well and you can deliver the types of services that can drive new incremental revenue for them, you are somebody that the top tier vendors and the new suppliers that are coming into this market want. You've got power, right? So the services, clearly, we see that. If you were just to peel it back, I think, and look at your own business and say, where did I get my growth in the last year? It's not going to be in hardware. It might be a little bit in software, but it clearly is going to be in the services area. So that's growing, 8, 10% a year. No reason for us to believe that it won't continue to grow at that type of a clip. Right. Just take a look at the number of partners that tell us that they're in the managed services business, right? It's 68% in the next 12 months. We're seeing the total revenue derived from managed services and partner organizations now approaching 40%. And by 2015, managed services revenue grows by another 25%. So those are big numbers. And I know all of you are doing it. I don't know if you measure your business that way. I do think it's a good idea at some point to step back and do a good analysis of your business and say, am I seeing the same type of growth that the mean out there is seeing? Because if you are, then you're probably in a good space. And if you're not, you got to say to yourself, why? You know, if you're growing faster, great. But if you're not doing it, you could be out of touch. The other thing I think you really have to remember about all of this is when a customer starts to shift the way they want to buy, if they decide that you're not the player for them, they're not going to call you up and say, hey, love you, but I'm kind of de-emphasizing you. I'm going to go with this other supplier, this other solution provider. It doesn't happen that way. You just wake up one day and all of a sudden you don't have as much business from that customer. We talk about this with the vendor community all the time. If there's if piece of their partner base starts to say, look, you're not the right vendor for me in the future. I got to bet on somebody else. They don't call you up and say, hey, I'm de-emphasizing you. They just do it, and then you wake up. It's the same thing with the customer base, and I think you have to think about that. You need to be there as they make the shift. You need to guide them through that as we move forward. Right? Now, when you have to say back, where are the service opportunities, where partners see it, it's kind of interesting. It seems to me like it's still all around infrastructure, right? I don't think that's the way it remains in the future. To me, it's really more about the ability to drive revenue and bring a service that allows them to get to market more quickly, not just manage things that you've done in the past, like, you know, in a different way. That's the transition I think we're going through. First you do, and you work with what you know best, and then ultimately you start to really drive a business. And the key here really is being the outsourced provider that drives their business, finds incremental revenue and higher margin for them. That's where we really, you know, I think where we all really want to be in the future. So you start to take a look at some of the major trends out there, right? Clearly mobile is huge, and there's a lot of action here going to be, you know, Android versus iOS versus Windows 8 on tablets and phones and all of that. I don't know that much matters, the device itself, anymore, because we can all access whatever we need to access in the cloud. It tends to be compatibility isn't a big issue anymore. What is a big deal is mobile applications and the ability to spin up applications for customers quickly. We're seeing this new trend where it's not about bringing your own device anymore. It's about bringing your own app. At the end of the day, you know, when somebody comes into my organization, a new employee, and they bring their own device, right? It's not the device that matters. It's what they have on that device and what they want to access. And if we don't give them the tools that they think they need, especially the younger generation, again, they're so ingrained with technology that they're coming in, they're saying, look, I'm going to use apps. You know, Dropbox, right, is probably on almost everybody's machine today, but that was brought in to the organization. And that's a challenge for IT, right? Clearly there are security issues all around that and will be in the future, but there's a lot of apps that are coming in. So it's really now about bringing your own app. Things get viral very, very quickly, and they get out of control if for IT or for you. So how do you manage that, and how do you help the customer set think about that, right? We are seeing more and more app stores out there. You know, every organization is going to have its own internal app store. You're going to come into work, you know, a new employee, they're going to say, look, this is what's available to you. You need these 5 apps. Get them on the app store, the internal app store, and you're off and you're running. So it's going to be important to be able to spin up, I think, these apps for customers, whether you have that capability in-house or you have some outsourced developer in India that, you know, can spin it up for you quickly. You need to provide that service, and you need to have the capabilities. You know, we, about a year or so ago, went out and built the CRN tablet app. We now have done it on Windows 8 as well. When we first looking for somebody that could do it for us, I couldn't find anybody that I felt really comfortable with. And I'll tell you, the experience of getting the iOS app up was painful. You know, late, over budget, you know, didn't like the supplier. You know, the Windows 8 one actually went much more smoothly, less costly, and interestingly, was really built onshore, not offshore. So, and we used a solution provider, Slalom, which many of you, you know, there may be somebody from Slalom in the room here, but they're up in Seattle. They opened a Boston office. We went with them. It was a better process, but they were able to take us down a path very quickly where I thought a year or so ago I couldn't find anybody. So things, again, they're happening rapidly in this mobile app development space. Hybrid IT and cloud computing, yeah, I agree with that. I know Tiffany talked about it a bit yesterday. Clearly, we are in this, there's a piece of the private cloud, there's a piece of the public cloud, and the customer needs to manage all of it. Big data, great area to be in for the next few years, clearly, because I don't know that there's 3 people that can define it the same way. So big data is clearly, there's a bit of mystery around that. What does it mean? What can I really do with it? There's margin there. And again, I look at everything as being early is always better than being later. Things get commoditized over time. Technology-born businesses, there are so many businesses that are being formed today or reinventing themselves on technology. Everything they do is based on technology. And we didn't see this in the past. You didn't come up with an idea that had to live on technology generally. That's the way it is today. You can't be competitive if you do it otherwise. And then I think really security around the renegades that are coming into organizations, there needs to be some level of control, and you need to be able to help the customer do that. Otherwise, their data is at risk. Compliance is at risk. They could get themselves in trouble legally depending on what kind of business they're in. Data needs to be protected. Security needs to be in place on devices and apps and all sorts of things. So I've never really seen a point in time in my almost 30 years of being in and around the channel that offers so much opportunity right now if you just think about the business model and where you need to take it and where you can actually make margin. Right? But we've seen this story before, and a couple of 3 years ago, we were talking about cloud and managed services, and nobody quite really knew where it was going to go. And I remember talking to many people in this room at times that would say, "Yeah, we're still infrastructure. We got to figure out the cloud." Well, the reality of it is that more than 50% of the audience has now got a cloud offering. It's going to grow rapidly, right? Revenue is coming faster there. It's going to get commoditized like everything else. Amazon just dropped some pricing on some database services they had this week. D&H just did a deal with a cloud provider. So, D&H, for those of you that maybe don't deal with D&H, the distributors, I think, are doing a great job. They've figured it out. D&H really services solution providers that go after really small businesses. Now they're going to have a cloud offering. This is going to get commoditized. It just has to. It's the way it is. It's life in the world of technology. So you got to think about the suppliers that you have, and you have to really think about your niche, right? How do you add value? Because it is, if you're just in the real general space here in cloud, we're looking at commodity status pretty quickly, I believe, right? It has to happen. Mystery brings margin, and others don't. Now, we've done some trying to define, what the different business models are. Our iPad team did this a year or two ago. And if you take a look at what's really grown, it's really that cloud service provider area, the integrator area. And the definitions of these are pretty detailed. You can get them on crn.com, or we're happy to give anybody the slides here. I don't really want to read them and go through them all individually, but clearly that area of service provider is growing. I think you need to say to yourself, what's the model that I want to be in, right? Where is it that I believe is going to be the best path to best margin for my organization? What's my skill set? Do I want to be a cloud builder? Do I want to be a cloud supplier? We talk about cloud brokers of the future. I believe the brokers of the future really are going to be the distributors, right? They're really going to be the ones that are going to manage big pieces for a big portion of the solution provider audience. So that broker business is probably going to play there. We're also seeing all sorts of other changes in the market, right? So I do think you need to get to know the CMO and the line of business. Everybody down to the janitor is going to be spending, obviously not the janitor, but you really need to understand that organization really well and find budget. There are lots of budget all over these organizations, right? Small businesses are more and more receptive all the time. They want to do cloud. They'll spend more on IT in the future than they have in the past because they can now buy it as a service. For a small business, it's pretty scary to write a big check, have somebody come in, drop some infrastructure in, teach my people how to, work with it, and then walk away and, probably 20% of it gets used and 80% of it doesn't. If I'm buying it as a service and I'm writing a monthly check, works for me, I keep doing it. Doesn't work for me, I stop doing it. I think you have to be progressive, but think about things from a transformative-minded way, right? Transformatives, as we talked about, is pure cloud, and really, 100% of my revenue is now coming from recurring revenue when I get to the transformative space. You don't have to be there. You may never have to be there, really, but you need to be progressive and lean in that way, we believe, right? We do see roll-ups change in the makeup of the channel. We haven't announced it yet, but I will here. We are going to be launching an event for partners that are looking to sell their business. We're going to bring small groups of partners together. We'll be just in the background facilitating this. People that will come in and help them understand how to pretty up their business, how to put it to market, how to get in front of the right buyers. So we'll bring those buyers and sellers together. I personally believe we're going to, back in the mid-90s, we had 10 or 12 billion dollar players in the solution provider space. They all went away when open sourcing came along, pretty much all of them. We're going to see a number of billion-dollar players again, right? Big channel players, which kind of changes the dynamic and the relationship with vendors. If I'm a multi-billion-dollar player, I've got more capability to push the vendors in a particular direction than I do when I'm a $40 million solution provider. So that will change things. There are roll-ups going on. We're seeing a lot of players that are looking to acquire and buy. There's a lot of $500 million players now that we didn't see just a few years ago. So that's going to change. There's clearly room for all pieces in the market, but we're going to see billion-dollar players, and there are some people going to say, I got to get big or get out. I personally don't believe you have to be big or get out, but you do have to be, really good at what you do and find a really good customer set. You are going to need more customers in the future than you have today because it's a cash flow issue. So understanding where you fit, I think, is really important. And pick the distributors and the suppliers really carefully going forward. I think a lot of the top vendors in this market have really understood how they need to move to the cloud and how they need the channel to do that. And just 3 years ago, there were questions whether or not I think they felt like whether or not they needed the channel to do so. There were certainly questions of whether or not the distributors were going to make it through this transition. I think all of that's been settled. The vendors that really understand channels, really understand their own business, are saying we need the channel. In fact, we need a better channel than we have in the past. We need to invest in that channel. We really need to, quite frankly, help them market themselves better than we have. So they're spending money. They're thinking about it really deeply. I'd argue that many of the people in this room and many of the people in the channel in general still don't think about marketing and sales strategy the way they need to. But the vendors are, and they're going to put dollars there. We continue to launch through partner marketing initiatives. The vendors are helping out. So I think you got to pick your distributors and pick your suppliers with that thought process of how do they help me go to market. It isn't just about the margin I get when I sell their product. It's really about the service I get, the support I get, and moving forward. So that's a real quick look at how we look at things. If anybody's interested, I could probably take a question or two before we move over to a couple of questions, a couple of minutes. I got 2 minutes. If there's any questions, if not, we'll move over to IBM.
I don't know, Bob. Maybe they're shy or tired. I'll ask one question so we can round it off to the hour. So, on your point, great data, Bob. I enjoyed it. I can tell you that as one of the people that works for you.
Yeah, but you work for me, so you had to enjoy it.
I thought I'd say that. So one piece of advice to the audience here from your point of view. So you said line of business is becoming more active in IT purchases. You can give examples of us internally. So how do these guys position themselves from a sales and marketing standpoint to get their message across to those people, right? Because yesterday when we asked for a show of hands, not everybody in this room is necessarily as engaged with line of business as we think. So what's your advice from a sales and marketing standpoint for solution providers to be more effective in that regard?
Yeah, and we did, IPED did a study 6 or 7 years ago, and we tried to look, back in the days when we looked at things with the kind of the lifestyle VAR and the growth VAR. We say, what are the hyper-growth VARs? How do they look? What are the attributes of that company versus those that are in lifestyle mode and not growing? And the ones that were in hyper-growth spent 150% more on marketing, more than 100% more on sales resources. You think about it, the absolute best marketing you can do is have, I think, in the current customer set, is have a salesperson in there that understands the organization really well and has the time to move throughout it and build different relationships. I do think, lunch and learns inside of an organization, or getting access to a line of business through a relationship you might have with an IT director who's happy to open it up today. I think, they were afraid of this a few years ago, but today, I have a much different relationship with the IT director in my own organization today than I used to. I kind of didn't like him before. Largely because I felt like it was always a stumbling block. You wanted to do something, it's like, oh, Jesus, it'll be 2 years and big CapEx expenditure, and, I don't know if, and they never came in on time. Now it's much different. It's like, I'm looking at this supplier. I take calls all the time. And I don't think I'm any different than any other line of business. I will take a cold call from almost anybody. I'll give them, 4 or 5 minutes. And if they have something interesting, I'll give them 30 minutes in the office, right? I kind of feel like I'm going to learn something, and I might discover something that's really worthwhile. Maybe I'm unique, but I don't think so, because I'm not that smart. So I do think kind of pushing the envelope a little bit is a marketing technique. The other thing is, I happen to live in the Boston market. I'm hearing more ads on the radio when I go to work in the morning from partners. Just never heard it in the past, right? Now, they spend their own dollars doing that, there's market development funds, but there's a message there. Somebody sparks something, somebody hears something. So there's, I think you have to think about it more like a traditional organization. And we're so used to being small businesses and trying to watch every nickel. Sometimes you got to act a little bit bigger and just put it out there a bit, I think, to some degree. So with that, Bobby, I'll hand it over to you. Appreciate the time, everybody. Have a great show.